So this is part 2. I thought the videos might be a little bit long to have both parts as one. So I'm working with this image, the Bubble Nebula NGC7538, and we want to work on the stars. Basically, I've binned this down to 800% less resolution, and so from a distance, if you're happy to look at this on your phone or even from this vantage, it looks okay, but I want to improve upon that. So the first step here is to remove the stars. I'm going to be replacing them with stars from a higher resolution or a less binned image. So we go to Mask, Auto, Stars, and the feature size default is 8, which I will leave at that. And I'm going to try 5. And when I do this, I often have the issue of it actually selecting red out of the nebula, and I don't want that. So I'm going to ask it to exclude the color red. And that seems to have done a fairly good job. Okay, and it's unavoidable. It's still selected things I don't want it to select, so I'm just going to remove that. This I consider part of the nebula, not a star. And this is just a little bit fiddly sometimes to try to remove all the little blotches. But there's, like I say, there's sometimes no way around it. Anyway, I'm deciding now that this is really too much work and there's too many fine details I could lose. So I'm going to redo that. And I'm going to set the filter sensitivity one less. So the 6 is less sensitive, and try that again. Okay, so a few of the same issues, but hopefully I'll have less work to do. And we'll leave it at that. So it's important now to see that the stars are masked perfectly, because if they're not, even if we detect a slight glow underneath one of the masked stars, that's going to show up as a rather nasty stain when we finally remove them. So there is an example. It's a big star. In fact, the O3 is bigger than the HA, and so the color from the O3 is kind of going around that. There are some ways around that, but just for now I'm going to make sure I remove all of that. Okay, so you see we've done it there's some stuff in the background yet, but we can always pass to a star removal one more time after this. Okay, so we're going to keep that result. We're going to go to Heal. I'm going to grow the mask by 2 pixels, and new is darker than old simply means that we're left with something that's darker than the original. I'm not sure why that's not by default. Okay, and it's going. So this is the result. Okay, and as you can see, there's still some stuff in there we could get rid of. Very, very faint stars, and kind of what ends up looking like little blobs. So I'm going to keep the result, and I'm going to do another mask, Auto, Stars, feature size 1, so very small. And I'm going to try something like that. Okay, something is not right. Try that again. I'm starting to realize my problem is that the filter is set to ignore red, and this is pretty darned red. So that's probably good for removing the little blotches within the nebula, the brighter areas. So I think I'm going to stick with that. Sorry, I'm not very good at editing videos. Otherwise, I just might cut this part out because I'm going to try again. And I'm going to this time not have that to exclude red. Okay, so let's see what happens now. Okay, so it's picking up more now. Sometimes to get rid of something like this, the pixels are too small, and though one might think it won't make much of a difference, it does, especially if you set it to remove the stars beyond 1 pixel in diameter. So you can remove it this way. So what I've done here, it's a very, very conservative threshold I've set for getting stars here. So that's mainly to get the small stars out of the nebula. So I'm going to now going to heal that as I did before. I'm going to do the same thing here because obviously I've selected too much of the nebula. This is a very low resolution image, and so by growing the mask by 1 or even 1 is quite dramatically, you'll see the effect. If I did it by 3 or so, it would take out parts of the actual image. Okay, so we'll say that's good. Okay, now I'm going to do a bit more of an aggressive one. Okay, so I'm going to increase the sensitivity. Perhaps too much. Okay, so for now, and just because I'm not going to get this perfect, I'm I'm going to make sure that these are not in the main nebula. So I'm going to select the lasso tool and just surround that. And maybe just the brightest parts of the bubble. Flood fill lighter pixels brush. Okay, and now I'm going to again do a heal. I'm going to set it for 2 just to hopefully smooth that out a bit. Okay, let's see what that did for us. Okay, so this is not perfect, but I think it's better. Okay, so the next step that I would do here, and here is where I would say we're all welcome to use other software. I'm going to try and smooth out the background a little bit. And Startools isn't pretending to be a Photoshop or GIMP, so if you want to now go into other software, that would be good. But I'm going to try and make do with what there is. So once again, I'm going to mask it according to luminosity. So the selection mode is highlights threshold. And basically I'd like to smooth everything around the nebula, and so I'm going to ease up on that. Okay, so invert it. Now everything around the nebula will be affected. Go into the layer mode, and I'm going to give it a bit of a Gaussian blur and do a little bit of a mask as well, mask fuzz. So you can see here that's improved. Okay, so I'm going to keep that. Probably one last little tweak before I get the stars back in there. You remember this star I had, which I removed. It had the blue. Well, it's caused a dark spot here. So very quickly I'm going to get in with the mask, lasso, try to draw just around it. Keep, go into the color module. I think I'm going to remove some blue, maybe a touch of green. That's helped a little. Okay, so that's helped a little. I'm going to increase the red. And that's good enough. Okay, so I'm going to save that as no stars, NS. Okay, so now I'm going to get the stars back. So I go to the Compose module. I'm going to use the luminance stars. So go back to the HA, the luminance stars, sorry, the HA stars, and I'm loading red there. So I'm doing a traditional bicolor palette here. And in bicolor, some people just prefer to desaturate all the stars so they're white. Otherwise, colors can be pretty funny, but I'm going to try and still add a little bit of color in contrast to the redness of the nebula. Okay, select that to LRGB. Keep. Okay, so a couple of ways of doing this. I'm really not concerned with the main points of interest here, the nebulas at all, but I'm going to take a star, let's say this one, and I'm just going to select it, and the region of interest all the way to 100%. And there is absolutely no science here. Stars are very tricky to work with, and every data set is different. So you just have to look and try to imagine what that might look pasted onto the nebula example. I'm going to say I want a little bit more than that. Okay, it looks good in context to this very, very dark image. Okay, I'm going to maybe go with that. And there is already quite a bit of noise here, which makes the stars difficult to extract once I'm done. So I'm just going to reduce the contrast here by setting aggressiveness to 0. Okay, so this is what I've got. Okay, and I want the best possible stars I can get here, so I'm going to do deconvolution. Let Startools create my own mask. Its own mask, excuse me. Okay, so I'm just selecting a small portion there to see how that renders. Okay, that's an improvement. It does create some noise. Okay, so the stars are poking through a bit better. I'm going to fiddle with this a little bit, not too much. If I raise it above 1, it will help with the noise a bit. Stars seem okay. That may be a hot pixel, I don't know. Okay, so apply that to the whole image. Okay, so I'm going to keep the result. Okay, and I think we're going to now go get some color. And the deconvolution has inversely selected these stars. I've inverted it now, and so the main stars are chosen, and I'm going to use this to work out our white balance. Okay, so when we go into the color module, it's going to attempt to balance this. Of course, it's not RGB, so it's not going to be real, but we might get at least a balance of colors. So sample. Okay, and now I'm going to the mask. I'm going to clear it, and I'm going to apply that information to the whole image, including the smaller stars. Okay, so this is the image now as if I had added the S2 to it. Okay, but you can see that the stars have some variety of color, which is what I was hoping for. I'm going to reduce the green somewhat. Desaturate that a little bit. Keep it, and now I need to denoise, so I turn off tracking. Okay, and I make sure the grain size is set appropriately. So we, again, the whole point of this is not because I want the whole image, is I want to make sure I can extract the stars from the image and not to be worried about noise as well. So this is the result of the denoising. I have centered an area here, and this is what I set it for, the settings here. We can obviously change these. So I'm going to lower that a bit. Again, I want to denoise, but I don't want to get rid of some of those stars. So I'm going to bump up the brightness and color detail loss, which basically further denoises it, but retains, as I believe, a little more detail. So that's not too bad. I'm just going to leave it at that. Okay, so from this point, I'm going to use the mask tool again to select the stars, and I'm going to remove them. Set 8 at default. And I'm going to try something like that. So I want to make sure that the stars are selected and selected well, because we also want to grab the glow from the stars, because if we paste stars that don't have a glow, it looks quite artificial. Again, I've got this in the original image, so I don't want to add that to it. Okay, I think that's pretty good. Okay, did a good guess there as far as the settings go. This is not so good. That should be all right. And we go to the heel module. Okay, new, darker than old. I'm going to set the quality for low because it doesn't matter what happens to the background. I'm going to throw that away anyway. And I'm going to do a fairly generous grow mask to grab the glow. Okay, so that did a pretty good job. I'm going to keep that. I'm going to apply a mask to the entire image. I'm going to go into the layer module and I'm going to do undo to the background. So now I have my stars and the nebula. Here I just have the nebula. The layer mode I set to subtract, and I have only stars now. Okay, so I have to ask, is that what I like? And that's pretty good. I'm going to try to shrink the largest stars ever so slightly though. So can I mask? Auto. Okay, and I want to leave the small stars alone because if I shrink them too much, they'll basically look like dust. So I'm shrinking to remove those stars. And I'm going to grow. And I have grabbed a lot more than the brightest stars, so I'm going to try that again. And that should be pretty good. Go to shrink. Okay, that's pretty good. So I'm going to save that. I'm also going to try to remember the size here, 2466, because I have to resize the nebula layer to this size, okay, if I'm going to combine them. I'm going to call that layer star. Okay, and I'm going to go into GIMP or whatever other software you have on hand. It's this very, very basic operation, what I'm doing. Was it 2466? And that was supposed to be 3461. Okay, so we're going back to Startools, And I'm going to layer. And we're going to add the two together. And without any editing and a guesswork, that's what I've got. So we need more contrast, and that's to bring out the stars. So I'm going to do a little bit of tweaking. We go to contrast, set for a fairly mild setting. It's a little too much for me. Okay, so that's too dark. So I'm going to raise the white point a little bit, and we do that by going to the Develop module. And Sky Glow. That would be probably comparable to raising the black point. And I like that. So that's pretty much it. I think we've got something better than what we started off with at the beginning of the video. It's not perfect by any means, but considering the data, this is really not bad. There are a few more tricks in Startools that you can do. One's called the Entropy module. This is new, and I'm at a loss to try to explain to you what it does exactly. But it works with bringing out detail in the shadows and bringing detail with regard to color detail. So I'm just going to maybe try something. So you can see the difference. It's subtle, but it's bringing out the dark deep reds a little bit, as well as a nebula slightly. Okay, so as I understand, the lower the setting, the more it favors the shadows or the faint details. So I'm going to go for that and increase the strength. So that is my final result. And just to finish off, I'm going to add the Sky Glow just one more shot. Okay, and that's it. Thanks for watching. I hope that was of some help to you. Take care.